to season 3 of the Fantasy Grimoire podcast. And today we have the incredible Sheila Masterson with us. Welcome, Sheila.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I am still honored that you said yes, because you're another one of these authors that I kind of stalked on social media because I read The Poison Daughter. I loved it. And I was like, who is this author? I need to know more about her. So I think it goes without saying, a little bit of a disclaimer. If you haven't read The Poison Daughter yet, there will be spoilers in this episode. Pause it. Go back and read the book, and then when you're done, come back and listen to the episode.
And I promise, I know that there are people who love spoilers, but I promise this is one specific occasion where you really don't want it spoiled. Like, just take my word for it.
I 100% agree with you, because and this has got nothing to do with me being an author, but usually you can kind of see like where the plot is going. And there is one specifically, actually there was more than one, but one that I'm thinking of right now where you dropped it and I was like, what the fuck just happened? And it was in the book. And I looked back on it and I was like, okay, you have laid the groundwork. It's obvious now that you've dropped this plot point. But I was like, how did I miss that? Shit. So yes, that's my way of agreeing with you. Let's get started with, I think, the most obvious question. These days, at the time of recording this episode, if anyone opens social media, at least all I'm seeing is The Poison Daughter. When you wrote this book, do you want to tell us, what did you have in mind for the ideal reader? Who did you want to target this story towards?
I had someone ask me recently when they were talking to me, like, oh, you're so sweet. And like, you're so like bubbly. Like, where does the darkness come from? I laughed because I was like, I live in the United States, and I was like, well, I don't know if you've ever watched, for example, the news of everything that's happening here. But I think a lot of what comes up for me when I think about writing is it's so often a place where I process things. And I know that's true for so many of us. But I think in particular, over the last few years, with everything that has happened in the US, around women's rights and reproductive rights, and just a lot of not so subtle oppression, and one of many groups. It's not just women. It's just that I happen to be a woman. And so I think that a lot of what I have been thinking about and putting into my writing over the last couple of years is really centered around feminine rage. And I've done so much thinking about people who don't have a safe place to express this. There are so many ways that women's anger is policed in the world. It's not even women. I think anybody who is raised or like socialized female learns a certain way to be angry. And also other people learn a certain way to be around women's anger. And there's really no good place for it in this world. And I think like every deviation you are from straight and white, it gets worse. I think that a lot of what I was thinking about when I was thinking about this book in particular is people who feel like there is nothing they can do about like the injustice. Like, I'm doing everything I can and it's still not enough. And I think we see a lot of that with Harlow in particular in the beginning, because there's a very specific situation with her sister that she would like to do something about. And for a lot of different reasons, she can't. And to sit there and watch somebody that you love suffer and not be able to do anything about it is so maddening. And so I think we see that like urgency in her. And I think that a lot of readers have connected with that piece in particular of, I'm so angry and I have nowhere to put it, and I needed somewhere to put it. So I think that I was thinking a lot about that kind of impotent rage and what you do with it, and how many people feel that way, because as much as we might all be trying to affect our environment and call our congressmen and donate money to causes that we care about, like, there's nothing we can do to stop this like machine,
Yeah. Because I think that's inherently one thing as human beings that we want to do, is we want to help. And when we can't, it's almost like we feel helpless. And I mean, something very simple, and I don't want to take away from the topics you just spoke about, but when I told people I had cancer, they would say something like, oh, hopes and prayers for you. And I'm like, well, that's not going to do shit. Okay, the doctors.
So true. People don't know how to act. Yeah.
Correct. And I was like, the doctors, they're the ones that are going to see it through at the end of the day. So let's place our trust in them and their guidance. And then to follow it up, people will go, oh, but chemo is poisoning your body. And I'm like, yeah, that's literally the point. In that sense, I understand what you're talking about, because I don't think that as a society understands how to deal with these very uncomfortable topics, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely.
And we sometimes say the first thing that comes out of our mouth, which 9 times out of 10 isn't always the best. Now,
Yep.
all of that being said, we're still humans. We still get it wrong, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
it. I just think it's on us to ask the question, to learn how to be better, which brings me to my favorite part of the question, because I looked at how you wrote Harlow's parents, and I'm like, oh my God, what terrible people. There are literally no redeeming qualities in these parents. They're not even morally gray anymore. I'm pretty sure they're morally black. Like, that's how I read them. I know you're also touching on many themes like abuse, grief, violence, action. I don't think there is a topic that you haven't got in The Pointed Daughter, but your portrayal of grief really touched me because it was so visceral. And this is where the first spoiler comes in. When you dropped that plot twist about Ada at the end, I almost dropped my phone. I was like, what the fuck just happened? Again, in the best way. And I'm like, but it makes so much sense, because no one's going to keep Ada locked in her tower, even for abusive. So your portrayal of grief was so real. I felt like Ada was my sister in this moment, and I'm an only child, for the record. I just want to hear from you, like, knowing that grief is not something that's really easy to write. What inspiration did you tap into writing these topics, and how do you approach writing something that's so heavy?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good question, because I feel like common advice that you hear as a writer is not to write grief because it's too slow. Like, nobody wants to sit in the pit with you. And I think there, some truth to that, but having written grief in almost every book I've written, I don't know that I agree entirely. And so I knew that for Harlow, that she is not very vulnerable for obvious reasons. I mean, as we meet her parents, we kind of understand why she is the way she is and why she has so much resistance to any kind of vulnerability. But I also think it makes a lot of sense that she wouldn't have really had the space to grieve so much in that family. So that feeling of helplessness, and how do you motivate yourself in that? Because that's definitely something she was dealing with for a while with her sister. So I think there's that piece, but also she's a very action-oriented character. I mean, she literally became a serial killer because she is not able to kill the one man who is abusing her sister. When I thought about like who she is as a character, I was like, there is no way that she is going to be the kind of person who's sitting there crying, or that will like take that failure and like process it in any kind of healthy way. And so I was like, and we, when traumatic things happen, how it all happened is also very traumatic. And I think one thing that we see over and over is the way that people recall things, like the way that her mother recalls things. Like, I didn't know that you needed me to step between you and your father. And you're like, like reading that, you're like, how? You're the mother. What do you mean? Yeah. And so I think like for her, there's a lot of like, we stay in some level of denial because we can't go there. And so I was like, this very traumatic thing happens when she's recovering. Like what's going on with her mentally, and like what parts of this can she accept, and what is she like just not at all ready to accept yet. And I think that failure, after putting so much energy into trying to protect her sister, is really part of what fuels this delusion, for lack of a better word. Like, I mean, definitely a feeling of grief, but I also thought about how grief feels in general when you lose someone and you're still expecting them to be right around the corner, or like you could swear you see them in a crowd, or like you come home and you're like, oh, well, they're going to be just like sitting in their favorite chair or whatever. It's all of those things that come up. And so I was thinking about it in a more literal way than we experience it as, as normal people. In her world, one of the most real things was her relationship with her sister. That was like probably the most honest that she is, the most vulnerable that she is. And so I really like could see in my head how that became like a ghost of her own creation. It was important for me that we get to see, she's almost like reliving the same thing. It's like that urgency keeps coming up, the fear keeps coming up, because if she can go back to that, that's the last feeling before it happened. So she's kind of created this thing where she can travel back in time a little bit and try to fix what she couldn't do the first time. And people always talk about the stages of grief, and they don't realize that that's for people who are dying. It's not for people who survive. People who survive go through all of the stages around and around and around. And so I was like, in a lot of ways, this is kind of her bargaining stage a little bit. It's like when you have an argument with someone and then later you're like laying in bed and you're thinking of the better thing that you could have said. It's almost like she has recreated the situation and she's like, okay, I'm going to do it differently this time. And this is how I'm going to fix it. So the entire time she like really truly thinks that she is back there, because grief is strange and our brain does weird things to protect us. You can see it in the way that the rest of her family talks to her. We can see it in how Kellen talks to her, how he's like kind of checking on her a little bit. He doesn't ask her because that's not how their family is. They all know that to show any kind of weakness is to welcome a world of pain.
I agree with you on grief. And I also agree with you on the subject of, yes, we can portray grief in our writing because it is very real. And I think the whole point of being an author is to make our readers feel something, whether it's grief, which I felt that grief when she realized the truth about Ada. Like, I needed a moment to process that because, like I said, it was so visceral. But at the same time, I truly also want to feel like this character pisses me off, or I love this character, etc., etc. And that's the whole point of why we read, is to feel something.
For sure, for sure. The whole book, you're watching her and she's so hard to get to know and she's so hard to like let anyone in. And I think as you kind of peel back the layers, you see like the stuff with her parents, and Henry picks up on that right away. Like, one of the first things that he notices in their interaction is how she doesn't even flinch when her father cuts her arm, and it's like a serious cut, and he's like expecting her to be essentially like a pretty bimbo, and she's not. I mean, imagine you are expecting a pretty bimbo and you get a serial killer. I mean, he really was not prepared. But I think like he notices that, he sees the way that they talk to her. I think in a lot of ways, their parents are like mirrors of each other, because his parents are obviously, they've got their own stuff going on that they haven't worked through. But a lot of their actions come from a place of like fear and grief. They're trying to preserve him in such a way that they cannot lose him because they've lost his sister. And so I think we see the way that that comes from like their grief. And in general, I think as people, we are a lot more forgiving of that. Then I think it's still kind of horrific when you think about it, the stuff that he has done for them. And they still have that like expectation, and they're still driven by revenge. Grief is sort of on all sides of this, and I really wanted it to be sort of a reflection of each other, because they do kind of come from these somewhat similar circumstances. For Henry, it was quick, but really like left a impression on him.
My favorite example, shout out Nikita Bell if you're listening, her one main character, October, she's a necromancy witch. She's not a good person, let's just go with that version.
Yes,
and
love it.
Her tagline is literally villainous woman doing villainous shit. Okay, and
yes, perfect.
She did this live the one evening with her audiobook narrators, and everyone's talking about how October's morally black, and I'm like, what is she? Like, I kind of understand why she's doing what she does. Like, maybe she's more morally gray. And Nikita turns around and she goes, babe, she's morally black. Like, there is no question about it. She literally murders people when they piss her off, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to sit here quietly.
What does it say about me?
Like, because here I am justifying her decisions. But you touched on Henry a little bit there, and I was completely thrown by Henry's drained status. If I had the physical book, I would have thrown it across the room. I want to talk about the spice, because I would definitely classify the Poison Daughter as heavier on the spice side.
For sure.
But there was, I almost want to say, like this empowerment to the spice scenes that I don't think I've read before. And I just want to chat, like, what did you have in mind when you went in with this angle to the spice?
Yeah, so like everything else, I knew this book was going to be spicy. It's always driven by the characters, because people are like, are your books going to keep just getting spicier and spicier? And I was like, no, it's really about the dynamic between the characters. And all of my books have some spice in them. This is by far the spiciest. Like, I literally asked my family not to read this one. I was like, maybe we just skip this one. So did they listen? No, I just found out. My mom casually slid it into conversation last week that she read it. And I was like, okay, everything's fine. Everything's fine. And immediately my street team, of course, they were like, what did she think of the Shane scene? Did she like the hunt? I'm like, you guys, I swear to God. I swear, just being hazed 24/7.
I just need to know if you can say the word sex ritual with a straight face to your mother going forward, because
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The fact that I am talking about a sex ritual in a professional setting is so funny to me. I'm like, what is my life right now? I knew that I wanted to do some type of ritual. Like, I knew that I wanted that to be part of it because, well, for a lot of reasons, that's just one of the things that I've wanted to do for a while. But on top of that, I was like, okay, whenever you have an enemies to lovers arc, you really have to find ways to put them in situations where they're forced to be vulnerable in some way. And so I was like, I knew that I wanted that to be part of it because there is like a required intimacy of some kind in there. We know from the beginning that they're attracted to each other because when they meet, they don't know who the other one is. I really love the element of having them already know that they have really strong chemistry and then like have to deal with that. But on top of that, I was really fascinated by the idea of this woman who has a lot of experience. You know, she's 30, she's been with multiple people. She's been married and
she's
widowed.
bi as well.
She is bi, yeah. And she is not like, she's way more comfortable with physical intimacy than emotional intimacy. She's never really had the experience of kissing someone without them dying immediately. And so when she kisses Henry for the first time in that, I think it's like chapter 3 or something, she has this moment and she says something like she thought that kissing was novel just because it was something that she couldn't do. And like for the first time, she kind of understands why people like it because like she's kind of having this moment. And like when she's with B, she says like people forget when they're in the moment, they forget. And so she always has to be hyper vigilant so that she doesn't accidentally hurt someone that she cares about. It would be really difficult to relax and enjoy yourself if you're worried you're going to accidentally kill someone that you don't want to kill in this particular case. For her, there's sort of like this twofold thing that comes into all of those scenes in general, which is that for the first time ever, she can kiss someone without it being dangerous. For her, it's also like a new kind of intimacy because she has not had that before. And so for the rest of us, we're like, oh, it's kissing. Like we've done that with plenty of people. It's no big deal. And like, I think that he realizes the power of that with her. Henry is very observant and he definitely picks up on this stuff really quickly. I knew that they had the chemistry, but also even in that scene where they're doing the ritual, he's locked in and he's trying to prove a point to her in that like, it's a lot more intimate than she wants it to be. She thinks they're just going to like fuck and like that's going to be it. She's going to have an orgasm, whatever. And then she has like the best orgasm of her life, breaks an ancient artifact. And it's all because there's like this intimacy aspect. And then she's so pissed afterwards. She's like extra prickly, like, and every time something like that happens, she gets that way. But I knew that I wanted it to really be, she is like for him, she is always in control. And I think a lot about consent and power dynamics when it comes to intimacy scenes in particular. And I, as the author, knew all of these things about Henry and like his strength and where he is coming from. And that the one magic that she has does not work on him, which automatically puts him in a place of he has more information and more experience and more power just all around. For that reason, I was like, he really needs to be focused on her consent and making sure that she is comfortable. I mean, he does. He makes a very quick study of her and she hates it. I mean, she likes it clearly, but she's so uncomfortable. Like she's so uncomfortable with anyone knowing her. But also like when you think about it, like in her family, someone knowing you is someone knowing how to manipulate you. That's how she equates like having any type of intimacy is that like someone will use it against you. And so I think that it was really important to me to feel like in all of those scenes, Henry was sharing what power he has. He lets her know what to expect in the ritual. He makes sure that she understands. Does he get a little carried away? Sure. who can blame him? And she does really try to test him. So to be fair, she loves to push some buttons. So I think like he does an admirable job of not totally losing it. But I really wanted those scenes to be that way, to feel like we know that he is stronger and that he could probably overpower her, but in every scene he is looking for her. Like, he wants to win her over. He wants her to say yes to whatever it is that they're doing. And I wanted that to be really clear the whole time.
I am not one of those readers where I personally care about if it's true enemies to lovers or not. I'm just like, give me the vibes. That's my thing. But I will say, the poisoned daughter, I now get why some readers get so pissed off, because now that I know what true enemies to lovers look like, because that's what I classify Henry and Hollow as. That is a
100%.
true enemies to lovers. Sure, I know they're going to end up together eventually, and I mean, you really waited until like some of the last few pages for that to happen. But I'm like, the way they fight each other the whole way to get there. I still remember when I finished the book, I was like, oh, this is what readers mean when they say they're looking for true enemies to lovers now. Like, yeah. I really felt that with him.
She is not willing to give him an inch. I was hesitant at first to like call them enemies to lovers, because I'm like, I know that he hates her family, and I know that she hates what he is in her life, which is the obstruction between her and what she wants. Any obstacle to Harlow is the enemy. So I was like, it's sort of non-specific, but then it gets specific. They just need to get to know each other to let the hatred grow. He has this very specific idea of who she is, and it takes him a minute to realize that she does not fit into that thing. And I think like seeing her interact with her parents, seeing the way she interacts with her siblings, and even when he learns about her sister, and he like learns this thing about why she's doing what she's doing, and it kind of reframes the whole thing, because like even in that moment, you see him in the bar and his friends are talking to her and whatever, and he wants to hate her. But he is also like, if somebody did that to Holly, like, I would absolutely kill them. He has that uncomfortable moment of relating to her, where I'm like, this is really like enemies to lovers. I think quite often is they're enemies at the beginning, and maybe their family has a feud and they don't have any personal beef. They need to have some sort of like personal buy-in to the enemiesness, you know, like I think for me, I mean, I'm also here for the vibes, but like what I really want is like a blood feud. Like I want generations of hatred. I want it to be really like established. And then I want them to have some personal tie-in to whatever's happening. And so I was like, I really wanted them to have that, because then you're starting from this place where your characters have no common ground, and they are, through some type of forced proximity, quite often arranged marriage, they're forced to find some kind of common ground. And in that common ground, there's sort of like this mutual respect that develops. Like, will she listen to Henry? No, but she will respect some of the things that he says and use them herself. So we kind of see them like start to transition through this, and he starts to understand her and what she's going to do. Even when he tells her things like to stay in the room, like he knows that she's not going to stay in that room. There's no other way for her to get out, but then like, of course, she finds a way to get out because she's her, and that's what she does. There's not a lock that's going to hold her back. That experience of he kind of starts to get to know her and respect, like as he kind of learns this thing about her, he's like, okay, like I did not totally have her figured out, but this is something I can use, you know. And I think that's sort of like the transition. And then we have them start to actually like each other, and that's like, we see those moments where like he's a little more playful with her. She is always mean, although, you know, she has her crafts, and I think that's like her version of being playful with him for sure. And then we have that place where they finally kind of start to have some kind of affection for each other. Like, will they admit it? Not necessarily. Like, are they in denial? Kind of. But I think that sometimes there's like this jump from we hate each other to we love each other. It's that middle place that is the hardest to navigate in this trope in particular, because you have to find some way to make it feel like a progression without it feeling like very insta-lovey.
I don't mind insta-love. I think insta-love has its place, and I think it gets a lot of unnecessary hate, at least in the romance space. But yes, I do think there's a fine line between showcasing the enemies to lovers trope and it quickly becoming the insta-love trope.
one thing that I was really interested in examining in this book is the way that chronic illness really forces vulnerability on you when you may not be in a place where you're necessarily ready to reveal that thing, in particular when it comes to relationships, because it's a very difficult thing to navigate for someone when you don't know when you're going to feel bad and you don't know when it's going to come up. And in particular in her family, where that is a terrible thing. You cannot show any weakness. And you understand why they are that way, because this is how they're maintaining power. You're putting her in this place where anytime this comes up, she has to hide it. She does hide it from him initially. But when he realizes, I think it is really important that he does not treat her differently. So even she's like snapping at him, and so she's not well, she's throwing up, she's laying on the bathroom floor and trying to get him to go away. And he is just like, yes, you're very scary, like whatever, just like putting the ice on her head. And I think because he does not treat her any differently, and that's like really important to her. I think like it means a lot that he's not like, oh, you're weak now, or you're this, or you're that. And he's not coddling her. And she gets really like snappy at him too. Like after he's like, I know that you're not weak, but like, I'm always going to let you know that there's an exit plan so you can keep your pride, you know? And she is like that is a really nice thing for him to say. And he clearly recognizes her and who she is, and she hates it, you know?
That's something I think that I particularly resonated with Harlow and Henry's storyline, is because cancer is just the latest in my medical journey, unfortunately, nothing to brag about. I am very much of the opinion where I'm not defined by my illness. I'm still a person. And I've said this many times on my social page, cancer is not the most interesting thing about me. It's just a tiny blip on my radar. So when I spent, I would say, a good portion of 2025 being treated as the cancer patient, that was my response. So, did I look like Uncle Fester with my bald little head and no eyebrows situation? I'm going to totally own that one. But I'm like, guys, it's breast cancer. It's not brain cancer. My brain still works fine. I am still a person. And it's like I was saying to my husband, people had reached out that I hadn't spoken to in years. Now all of a sudden they want a full rundown of my day. And I'm like, I appreciate it. Like, don't get me wrong. But you wouldn't have done this if I hadn't had cancer. And that's my problem. And that's why I really love seeing that, where the way I read it was like Henry was being compassionate. And I think that's the distinction that we need here, where my husband had my back. He was like, cool. He would actually say to me when we'd go to chemo, he's like, I'm coming with you to chemo. And he's like, I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it for you. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, you're being honest. And that's all I've ever asked, because he explained to me he's going to sit here in our home and he's going to stress for the however many hours chemo is. And he's going to freak the fuck out. So he's like, he's coming to chemo for him. And I was like, cool. And it's the same kind of concept of what you're talking there about Henry and Harlow.
For sure. And she's not really had that, even like when she talks about like her past, like she's never really had someone sit with her and whatever. And it is, he does care. And it is the same thing we were talking about earlier, where you can't do anything. And so all you're going to do is just like stress about it and be there. And I think when, you know, there's that one scene where he goes to answer the bedroom door and it's Kellen, and Kellen is sort of like, Kellen knows what's going on, obviously. And also he had just kissed her in front of the family. So they're like panicking a little. I love that scene so much because she's so mad. She's in so much pain and she's so mad at Henry. And she's like, how could you do that? And he's like, I made you look desirable. And she's like, you made me look sentimental. Like, he's so thrown. But then when he's talking to Kellen, like, you can tell that Kellen is sort of like, what is going on here? Because like, he's just sitting in there with her and he knows that Harlow isn't well. What are you up to? Kind of thing, you know? So I think that, like you said, it's that person who can just kind of like sit with it. And I think that quite often people are so uncomfortable and they don't know what to say. And a thing that happens, I don't know if you relate to this, is that you end up saying things to make the other person feel better so that you don't have to. I've dealt with migraines since like for as long as I can remember. Like I had them since I was a kid. And so like I don't ever remember a time before having them. In a lot of ways, I've not really ever known anything else. But I think like quite often what happens is somebody will be like, like they'll like say something and then I'm like, oh no, it's fine. You know, like it's one of the most annoying things about, or I am sure it's a thing with cancer because I've had friends who have cancer and I know that people do this. And so I'm like positive that you know what I mean. Part of what is so appealing to her is Henry is not treating her like she's weak, like her family would. And he is also not doing that thing where she has to make him feel better. And he's just kind of pretty unfazed by it and does not talk to her any differently. He's still teasing her. He's still doing all the stuff that he normally does to like taunt her and stuff. He's sort of like treating her the exact same, which is all she wants.
In my experience, the number one thing people love to do when they find out that you've had cancer is tell you all the people they know that have died from it. I'm like,
yes.
So I was like, so the one thing I'm trying to do right now is not die.
Not
So let's not have that conversation, please. And oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. You know, be like, it's okay. I'm comfortable talking about it now, but I couldn't at the beginning. So
for sure, understandable.
But I was actually stage 4 breast cancer, which in a normal scenario is a terminal diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And I knew that if one person told me I was terminal, like I was going to flip tables. Like I'm talking rager kind of thing.
Yep.
But what they explained to me is that there is a specific type of metastasis called oligometastasis, which is what mine was. And it was still curable. So for anyone listening, typically cancer, it doesn't get a cured status until 5 years with no active signs of disease. So we call me cancer free right now, but the goal is to cure me. Most people don't want to understand this explanation. And I know that if I have to explain this and one person says something like, oh, sugar feeds cancer. No, bitch, that's not how biology works. Thank you. So yes, I've had a wonderful time with those things. So I agree, being treated as someone that's still normal despite these not normal things happening to you can be the difference between sanity and not. That was not
totally. No, I know what you mean. And I think that's a big piece of it is who can you be around when you're not at your best that isn't going to make you feel like you have to do work for that or like labor for them. I think for her she does not have to pretend with him, but he's also not treating her differently to the point where she feels uncomfortable with it or she feels like, yeah, like he's coddling her and she hates that also. Like, I think like that is something that she just does not respond well to at all today. So that was one of my favorite things to write with the two of them is she's not had that experience of someone just not treating her any differently. And it's not at all what she expects from him, especially because he is so like broody and protective. And I think that as a culture, we are very like, we want to fix everything. Everything needs to be better. And so like what I find, again, somebody who has had migraines since I was really young is that people will say things like, oh, well, have you tried this? Or have you tried, like, they'll constantly like give me offerings. And I'm like, I'm 40. I've tried pretty much all of the things at this point. And I think that they don't realize that that's sort of like assigning labor of making them feel better to you. And I'm like, and I'm sure I'm positive that you dealt with that as well, because anybody who has any kind of cancer or health scare, anybody who has any kind of like chronic illness, like it's just like a constant thing. Have you tried an elimination diet? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? Like it's all of this stuff. Okay. Like, have you tried low sugar? Like, please, I've tried all the things. Trust me. I think that our obsession with like fixing and people want to feel like they are like always making progress. And there's not a lot of understanding about chronic illness in like the larger world from people who don't have it, because they're always like, well, you know, you could go to this doctor or this doctor. And I'm like, yes, but also like I have to live. I have to have a life also. So like I've done all of these things and I've tried all of these different techniques and I have a strategy for what works pretty well right now. And this is probably the best case scenario. I realize that it's uncomfortable for other people, that still means that sometimes I'm going to be knocked out by this thing. And also we don't need to fix me, you know?
I do want to ask though, and you're my first bookish hot take for season 3.
Okay.
What is your...
Oh my gosh. Oh, this is such a good one. You know, I did think about it ahead of time and I was like, do I have any hot takes? I think that, okay, hear me out. I love miscommunication. I love it. I know everybody will say, I hate the miscommunication trope, but I find that there's almost nothing in these books that is more believable than people miscommunicating. And obviously, I don't want the thing where there's one simple miscommunication that would solve all of their problems. That's not what I mean. But I think that often, if there's any kind of miscommunication in the book, we will have readers who are like, oh my gosh, they're so immature, blah, blah, blah. But like, girl, I have friends. I have been a professional tarot reader for 8 years. I know people's stuff, and I know that everyone is out here miscommunicating constantly because they are afraid of being vulnerable, or they're afraid of saying what they actually really want because they might not get it, or they're afraid of saying what they want because they're afraid the other person won't give it to them in relationships. And so, like, I don't want to hear from anybody that miscommunication is unbelievable or anything like that. I actually think it's great and it's very human. And part of the journey that we're going on, if you're talking about like any subsection of the romance genre, is two people learning how to communicate. And so I think all of these people who never want to see any kind of miscommunication in a book should read literally any other genre, because romance is about the journey of the relationship and what they are learning about each other and how they are learning to be together. And the biggest piece of that is communication. What capacity do you have to be vulnerable and share things that you need with the other person? And what capacity do they have? And when those things don't match up, or when it's too soon, or when there are other circumstances coming in and you cannot say the exact thing, or they misunderstand something that you say because they have a lot of trauma around it, that is not the miscommunication trope. And
Yeah.
I need everybody to understand that miscommunication is going to be a part of these books. And it's a very grounded, believable part of these books.
She's not here right now. My husband has her out. But so she's my border collie puppy. She's 10 months old now. Now, we got her mid chemo. And I'm the impulsive one, by the way. My husband's like, he'll take 5 years to make a decision. And I'm like, I'm over it. Like, make a decision, we'll fix it later. And when I sat with her for the first time, I said to my husband, this is our dog. And he goes, oh, let's just sleep on it for 24 hours. And I say to him, if you value your marriage, you will make sure that dog is mine. I was like, if that dog goes to another home, like you're dead to me, kind of thing. Anyway, we clearly got her. Lucky me. But in that case, that's a classic example of two very different people, two very different communication styles, where I am very much the whole YOLO. And I was like that before cancer. Like that, I think I'm maybe a bit worse now because of cancer, but like, I'm just like, what's the worst that can happen? Sure, we'll make a mistake, we'll fix it. Where my husband, he needs to like every single angle, and could this go wrong and that go wrong? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm exhausted for you. Like that is a lot. So we have spoken about as a couple before is that love is sometimes not enough. It's the other things where a relationship will break down. And that's why we try to work especially hard at those other things. So we know we love each other. Like that's not up for debate. But we come from two very, very different worlds. And we've had to put it together into one. And that's the hard part.
Exactly. And I think like, especially when you do have, everybody has their trauma, everybody has the things that are very entrenched from their family system. And it can be really hard to overcome that, even when you are in a relationship that feels safe to you. One of the things that I wish that more readers understood is how much that is like the biggest work of romance, and like that it probably should be present at some point in the book for it to be believable.
I also have to ask, what is one fantasy book that you believe deserves far more love from the Bookstagram community than it's been getting?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. I'm trying to think of something I've read recently. This is technically, I think, we're like edging a little bit over into horror, but one of my favorites is Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas, and is like both historical and fantasy and a little bit of horror. Like it's dark. I would say like if you liked this book, you would probably like that book. But there is it's a second chance romance inside of like a vampire book, for lack of a better word, because there are these like vampires in the world affecting this historical. It takes place in it's a historical. It takes place in Mexico, and I don't want to ruin anything, but it's a very very good book. Isabel Cañas, her prose is beautiful. She's such a beautiful writer. And it is like, I think about this book and I'm like, this is just an expert level second chance romance. And I do not know how she did this inside of this book that has all this other stuff going on. And then that's one. And then the other one, again, we're sort of on the fringes of fantasy. This book is a little bit of like a fever dream, but Roshani Chakshi's The Last Tale of the Flower Bride is, you kind of like are like, is this like, are we in a magical world? Is this some kind of delusion? Like, you're not totally sure what is going on for some of the book, but it is a reverse Bluebeard retelling. So the POVs are the bridegroom. He doesn't have a name the whole time. And then the best friend of the bride. And they're telling this story in tandem about this woman who is sort of like beautiful and enigmatic. And it's beautifully written, but it's sort of like a commentary on marriage, the whole thing. It's so good. And it's one of my favorites. It's a book that I read and then I immediately bought it on audio so I could listen to it because I was like, I need to do that again. I loved that. And I just feel like I need to experience it again in another format. So those are two of my like favorites.
So I'm not gonna lie, you really caught my interest with the reverse Bluebeard retelling. I was like, wait, what?
I think from our conversation, I think that you would really like it. Yeah.
So for me, I don't care if it's a plot we've seen before. Just give me one unique twist. And my favorite example on that is Stasia Stark. So I mentioned The Poisoned Daughter was my second 5-star read of the year. Stasia Stark was my first. So I read her We Who Will Die.
I'm in the middle of it. I'm in the middle of it right now. I'm having such a good time.
It was instant 5 stars. I do take issue with it being called romantasy because I don't think it's a romantasy.
Okay.
I will say that. And this is coming from a vibes reader. If I'm picking that up, I don't know how hardcore romantasy readers will feel. But I was like, sure, we've seen vampires 1,000 times before. Like, that's nothing new. But vampires in a gladiator stadium.
Yes. I know the vibe is so different. I'm having the best time. Read I think half of it in a day. I'm very much enjoying it as well. Yeah, but it's definitely, I'm like, I have not read anything like this. Like I know the tournament thing, obviously we've all there's been a lot of books like that recently, but such a different vibe with the gladiator piece, the vampires, there's so many cool elements.
While The Poisoned Daughter has been wildly successful, it's not your debut. And I don't think many people realize that. I counted at least 8 other books on your Goodreads profile. I want to know from your side or your perspective as the author, what did you do differently with The Poisoned Daughter that you maybe didn't do to your other books?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with The Poisoned Daughter is there's always an element of luck and timing, right? I think it is the right book at the right time, which is not replicable, unfortunately. I think some of it is time and place for sure. I also think that it is a standalone, which is one of the things I hear most often from people. So I think a lot of people are in the midst of a lot of series and it's I don't want to be left on a cliff. I just want to be able to read the whole story at once. And I kind of knew from the beginning that it was going to be a standalone. And what I have experienced as an author for the other authors out there is that I have experienced that it's a lot easier to get people to pick up a standalone. But
that's true.
Then what? Once you get to the end, it's then what? Because you still have to go and pitch the entire backlist and all of these different things. So I think that can be the hard part about doing a standalone. But I think a big piece of it was, first of all, the fact that it's a standalone. I think the fact that it's speaking to that feminine rage piece that is very hot right now. So this is my first enemies to lovers book that I've written. I have written Rivals, but this was the first true enemies to lovers. And I also think it's the twists. I think it's all of the twists that are kind of woven in there. So you still have a little bit of a mystery element almost. We've got a lot of questions that people are trying to answer. I think that those are kind of the big things. And there are also a lot of people who have sent me messages, particularly about the chronic pain rep, and that it is not the central part of the story, but it's still very relevant to who she is as a character and their relationship, which is how it is if you're a person. Like you don't really get to take days off from it. And it does affect your relationships. And I think that's one of the hardest things is like accepting that level of like vulnerability and stuff. And so I've received a lot of messages from readers about that piece in particular. So, and for me, from like a personal perspective, it's probably the most honest thing I've written. You know, there's always I think I'm pretty vulnerable in my writing in general. Like I think I have a high threshold to be vulnerable in the things that I write. And the Lost God series has a lot of mental health representation, for example, because I've had a lot of very long mental health journey. And Song of the Darkwood does have some of that like feminine rage and religious trauma. And like there's a lot of like bodily autonomy themes and stuff. I was writing that when in the US there were a lot of challenges coming up against Roe, and then eventually when the Dobbs decision overturned it. So I had a lot of anger that I was channeling into that book. But I think for this one, it's probably the most vulnerable book that I've written. And I think that there's something to be said for going there as an author. It's not that you have to share every part of yourself personally. I don't think that at all. But I do think you have to tell like the most honest version of the story that is in your heart, you know. In the acknowledgements of this book, I put this quote from Michaela Cole that I think about all the time. And she is, if you're not familiar with Michaela Cole, she wrote a show called I May Destroy You. And it's about SA, and it's a difficult watch, but it's one of the most brilliant representations of trauma that I've ever seen. It's literally like a genius level show. It's so brilliant. And she won the Emmy in 2021 for the writing on that show. And when she went up and gave her speech, she said she wrote something for writers, and I'm probably going to butcher the quote, but I think it's something to the effect of, like, the thing that scares you, that feels uncertain, that feels uncomfortable, I dare you, in a world that entices us to browse through the lives of each other, of others, to better decide how we feel about ourselves. Don't be afraid to disappear from us for a while and see what comes to you in the silence. And I thought about that a lot because I think it's very difficult to like go to those like heavier places and unearth some of this stuff. But I also think that for me, when I think about this book and why it's connected so much with people, I do think that there is an element of that in there as well, to like write something that does feel kind of big, kind of scary.
I'm going to separate this into two parts now. As the reader, it has everything I look for in a fantasy. So I am a die-hard fantasy girly. I very rarely read outside of the genre. If we look at fantasy overall, I don't care. Romantasy, horror, whatever, I'll read it. That's like literally my only requirement. But for me, what I enjoyed so much was you had the perfect balance of mystery, romance, completely unique world with a completely unique magic system. Sure, have we seen the gods represented with magic in other stories before? Yes, but I personally have not seen it done your way. And I think that distinction is important. And then your plot twists, I've already established. I loved your plot twist. As an author, what really impressed me was how well balanced all of these things were. I felt like the moment you took one of these parts out of your plot, it would start falling apart. And that to me showed how strong that storyline was. But as well, like, I still remember saying to my husband, your writing quality. I was like, this is why people are saying that indie authors can go toe to toe with trad authors now, because we are producing this kind of quality now. And I really felt that way about reading The Poisoned Daughter. And that's actually why I tried it out.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, actually. I spend so much time. I know a lot of people do not do like a full like line edit, but it takes so long. And this book is 235,000 words. So it took a really long time to do a line edit of that. Yeah.
I'm finishing the final stages in my current book that's launching in March. And there is a part where my FMC starts unraveling. And it is the hardest thing for me as a person to write because I don't get it. I was like, get your shit together. Like, it's not that hard. But I'm like, I can't write characters like me all the time because that's just boring. Like, why would I do that? And I'm bitching to my editor the whole time, and I'm like, I'm struggling to get this right. So she actually went in and started showing me. She was like, here, you're doing unraveling well. She's like, here, you could maybe tweak this a little bit. And that for me was so helpful because I don't understand it, but I was like, I know that sometimes that needs to happen from a story perspective. So I really to what you were saying there about that.
Yeah.
But before we start wrapping up, I do have to ask.
Yes.
Did Hollow poison Kellen's soup or not?
This is the question that I will never stop getting asked. What do you think?
Honestly, I think, oh my God, like I'm so like 50-50. In one breath, I am like, after Ada, Kellen was the closest thing she had to a sibling that she was actually close to. And I think the little girl in her needed someone to still be good. Okay. And I think her losing Kellen would have destroyed her. Like she would not have come back from that. But then I'm on the other side, and this is why I had to ask you. On the other side, she's like, fuck everyone. You're all dead to me. You didn't protect my sister. I'm going to just kill all you bitches. Like, that's the vibe I got. So that's why I'm like, I love how you handled that from a story perspective where it's up to the reader to decide. But I'm like, come on, put me out of my misery.
I refuse to answer. I've been asked so many times and I'm like, I'm not saying. I think like I love that scene so much because, you know, really early in the book, she says it's best not to make Kellen decide between us and my parents because then I don't have to be disappointed when he chooses them. And so like we already know that she feels that way. So when we get to this part at the end and like we know everything that has happened and we know that Kellen knows everything that has happened. And she has this thing that she says, I'm probably going to butcher it, but it's something like she's yelling at her father and she's like, what do you think? Is he your son or is he my brother? And I was like, oh, like she is like testing him so hard here because like she is kind of like, this is the final stand and you have to choose which one of us it's going to be. And I'm not afraid.
So it's Ross, okay, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it in true fantasy style. Rossio, what was the rebel's name? Rossio Silla?
Oh, Rocelli, yes. You were giving me a lot more credit than I deserved.
So, yeah, like finding out, and when I said at the beginning of the episode, that was next to Henry's drain status.
Yeah.
Finding out that Kenan was Rocello, I was like, I'm done. I'm done. Just like, show me out. Because that was fucking flawlessly executed.
Well, so many people were like, oh my God, it's B. Like the whole, like really early on. And I have to say, I benefit very greatly because one of my critique partners is a thriller writer. And so like, she's the masterful red herring writer. Yeah. I have learned a lot from reading her stuff and also from talking about books with her. And so it was, I knew there was going to be a lot of suspicion on B early on because she does have the access and it makes a lot of sense.
As we wrap up, there's two questions I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Number one, what can we expect next from the world of Sheila Masterson?
Yeah, so right now I am in the middle of a series of interconnected standalones. Song of the Darkwood came out at the end of 2024. And that is like a dark Red Riding Hood meets Hades and Persephone, but it's a true standalone. So in that one, we have a young woman who has a spirit enchanting voice, and she is tasked with ferrying souls of the departed across the Darkwood to the god of death. And there, like I said, there's a lot of themes around bodily autonomy and cultish religion. For some reason, can't imagine where I got the inspiration. And then this second book is what I'm working on right now. It's called Ballad of the Heartless. And it is sort of a dark Snow White meets the myth of Cassandra. If you don't know the myth of Cassandra, she was an oracle and the god Apollo really wanted to sleep with her. And he, when she denied him, he gave her perfect foresight, but cursed her that no one would ever believe her. Exactly. And so this is definitely a story about kind of how the world tries to extract magic from women rather than letting them like just bring it into the world in their own way. There's a real witch hunt vibe and kind of through this whole world. So there's, you know, a couple in the first book that are central. Yeah. And then one of the side characters in the first book is one of the main characters in the second book. So you've kind of got that like small town vibe. So you don't have to read them in order. There is a kind of overstory payoff if you read them in order, but you'll understand the world individually if you just drop into a specific one. And then the third one is not quite sure on the timing of that one. So the Ballad of the Heartless should come out this year. And then the third one was going to come out this year, but for reasons it might not. Just some background stuff going on. That one is called Symphony of Nightmares, and it is sort of I keep calling it a dark Sleeping Beauty, but with consent meets Orpheus and Eurydice.
So selfishly, I do have to ask, any special editions planned that I should know about?
Yes.
Over there.
So there is, let's see, there will be one subscription-based special edition later this year. And then there will also be one pre-order special edition later this year. I can't say anything about either of them, but I promise as soon as I can, I will share it. I am very excited to see how all of it comes together. We're sort of in the planning back end stages right now, but I'm very excited. And I have been keeping my nightmare is having to keep my own secrets, and I've had to keep this secret since literally August, and it is such a good one. And I literally screamed when I got the email initially. I know that people are gonna see this come out and they're gonna be like, oh, it's because the book did so well. And I'm like, no, I did it myself. I did it myself before all of this. I want the credit.
I couldn't agree more with you on that. If I need to keep someone else's secret, you know what? I'm a locked up vault.
I've got you. Good luck breaking in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. My secrets, on the other hand, what utter bullshit. I want the world to know. I mean,
absolute nightmare for me to have to keep secrets for longer than, I don't know, 2 weeks. What is this?
My one friend was like, oh, you should work on a secret project. And I was like, I'll try, but I'm not sold. This is terrible. Why would I do this?
This is completely in conflict to my personality.
And she was like, do these hints and stuff. And I was like, okay, but I feel like an idiot. Why don't I just say it? Secret project coming to you. Anyway,
relatable.
I eventually dropped the cover reveal months ahead. I was like, here's the secret project. I'm done. I'm over it. I still love the book. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
I'm writing it, but I'm not keeping it secret anymore. You guys can all deal with that. That's a you problem. It's not a me problem.
100%.
So I have never related to anything more in my life. I'm very happy for other authors. Well done to you. I will not be partaking in that. That's what I've come. If a listener / reader is listening to this episode and they're vibing with you and they're like, hey, I want to get to know Sheila more, what is the best way to connect with you as an author?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. I'm sorry. I'm old and I am not going to learn, I fear. So I'm most active on Instagram, but I also have a newsletter that I send every 2 weeks on the new moon and the full moon, like a good witch. And I do tarot in my newsletter also. So I talk about whatever I'm working on book-wise, but I also do a little mini tarot reading for the new moon and the full moon. That's the best place to find out anything upcoming or to get early news and stuff, because I'm more likely to share things on there first than social media when I know something big is coming up.
Sheila, I have to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to me today. I loved getting to know you and just your thinking process and just everything that you've been working on for us. And I can't wait to get stuck into your backlist now.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I had such a good time. I love to talk. I'm, I think, a rare extroverted author, so I love to yap. I love getting to talk to other authors about craft and everything in particular. So this is like the most fun a girl can have on a Friday, you know?